Welcome to the bench, a space for conversations that help us uncover our truest self. No masks, no judgment, just love. My name's Rob, and I'm joined today by my good friend Andrew. Andrew, for those who don't know you, how would
Yeah.
you describe yourself?
How would I describe myself? Um, let's see. Human being, feeler, connector, teacher, um, yeah,
Dancer, I hear that you're a
dancer,
dancer.
casual dancer for sure.
Casual
Um,
dancer. Taught me
mover of the
many a
body.
thing about some spine rolls.
Yes.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's really crazy. I'm excited. The kind of theme for this podcast is going to be about the life being a giant game of dress up,
Yeah. I
which
love
you
that.
and I have really talked a lot about. Um, and a couple weeks ago, Julian and I did one on identity. But I think just going even a little deeper into like how we both what costumes we put on, what roles we play, and then what happens when those things change, and actually going through the journey of changing them for ourselves, which is something you're really in the depths of right now.
For sure.
Um, but yeah, so tell us a little bit about your journey, no pun intended.
Yeah.
Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about your journey to like this point in your life, and yeah, maybe up to like before Samar, and then we talk about that decision
For
after.
sure.
Yeah.
You know what? Let me frame this. There's so many ways we could. Okay, so the theme of the podcast is life is like a game of dress up, or it's something that we love to talk about. And in light of that, there's so many ways that we can tell our own stories, right? In so each way of approaching our lives, because it's almost like this, zillion sided prism, it results in a different interpretation, or so there is no one story. But I think for this podcast, I imagine there's a lot of people that are coming to it knowing you, Rob, from basketball, from the basketball world. Maybe, I don't know. So yes, that's true. So then let me frame my story as it revolves around the game, because I think that's an interesting lens. I grew up, um, and basketball for me was was serious business at an early age. So I was good at basketball, and I played all sports, but I was really good at basketball, and immediately started specializing. So going to coaches, feeling this like sort of keeping up with the Joneses type of thing with people in my area who were on travel teams and AAU teams, and getting individual instruction and going to the weight room and things like that. So I became very, very deeply involved. And with that, my dad also became really deeply involved. So, there's stuff and nuances in here. My dad was really critical of me, like yelling from the stands during games. There's a lot of episodes and blow ups, but essentially, I learned that for me, basketball was tied in with paternal love, and was laden with a lot of pressure and performance anxiety, like very early on. So that's an emotional thing, almost like a retcon that I'm laying on top of the story. But as I'm going through it, all I'm thinking about from the ages of like 15 when I quit the freshman soccer team, to play more basketball, to like 22, is how do I like play, and how do I get as good as possible? So I played in high school, I played in college, I played all over. And through that, like I was able to sort of create this alchemy between the pressure and the anxiety I was feeling, and just like my genuine love for playing and being good at something, um, to let basketball take me all over the world. So, to give a couple examples, like I went down to the IMG academies in Florida for a summer. I was their youngest intern and was working a bit with the basketball department, but also was doing some communication coaching, but it's all around sports. Then I got the great opportunity to work for PGC for a summer. I've worked briefly with the Seattle Storm and the WNBA as a practice player. And most recently, Rob, we went to Tibet, right? Because I was
Right.
co-producing a basketball tournament out there, which is an opportunity that never would have come had I not just displayed this deep love for the game and felt connected to athletes. So that's a bit of my story. One more thing about it, and then we can sort of blow it up a bit. I want to say for anyone who is playing basketball, I grew up on Long Island, which is a pretty, like, Long Island's incredibly diverse, but it's also incredibly segregated. So I'm so grateful for basketball because it was bringing me into neighborhoods at a really early age that I just never would have, been hanging out in or had friends in. And I was exposed to a lot of different types of people really early on in life. So yeah, hooping a lot. I can say more, but should I pause? Do you want to interject?
No, I think that's great. And very similar stories, I think, which is part of the reason why you and I mean, there are a lot of reasons why we get on so well, but that was me too. I actually quit soccer. I quit freshman year, but to focus on basketball, and it was all basketball all the time. Like, similar thing with dad, like it was kind of his thing. And yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So all that changed for me. My senior year of college, I was coming off a summer of working at PGC. But for those who don't know PGC, basically substitute, like, I came off a summer of like elite training and elite coaching, and in a totally immersive way. So if you can imagine the summer before your senior year of college, most people are getting internships or doing something pre-professional and solidifying their kind of life plans. And I used that opportunity instead to really put all I had into my last shot at, being a contributing member of my team. And it was a total success in terms of, like, I was ripped and like, but also just like playing and quite frankly, leading at a very high level. And then the night before our first scrimmage, when I was set to be the starting point guard, I got a concussion. And that quite frankly, that impact, like, it knocked me off course, like, quite literally, but it also changed a lot of things for me. Actually, you might remember Ronald Norad from like PGC lore. So it's funny, Ronald Norad and I got a concussion basically at the same time. And I looked at Butler's schedule, and it said like Ronald Norad out 2 to 4 weeks, and I looked at Butler's schedule and I was like, all right, they play Duke in 2 weeks. Like, he'll be back for the Duke game. And then I looked at my schedule and I was like, well, 2 weeks for me, I'll be back for the first conference game, So I remember that early phase of the injury, and, Ronald was back. I'm not sure exactly when, but I never came back. I had just, like, I can't explain why, but I had very severe post-concussive symptoms, sensitivity to light, sensitivity to noise, headaches, depression, which is a medical symptom of a healing brain, actually. I don't know why. I don't know what that does to help the body, but it took me about 5 months to really, really get out from under that. So I missed the whole season, obviously. I also took a medical leave of absence from school to be at home. And, when I came back the next year and finally healing from that injury, at that point, I was trying to get back into shape, but I, like, pulled my groin attempting to do so. Then I sprained my thumb. Then I dislocated my finger. And there was a new coach. And I was just like, literally, my senior year, I came back to play, and I was literally the last guy on the bench. Like, I played the least minutes of anyone on the team. Now, I'm grateful and proud of myself for finishing. However, my story, which maybe we can get deeper into if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to.
It lies in those months of being injured, recovering, and the eventual transition away from basketball as an organizing force and passion into what's happening now, right? So for anyone who's going through a life transition or reprioritizing something, this conversation might be of interest.
And I think that's really the space I'm trying to create with Play Expo Love in general. It's like, what do you do when you lose your guiding thing, because that was it for me too. Basketball was always my thing. It was always what I wanted to do. And then I kind of had a similar moment where it was kind of ripped away from me, at least in the way I thought. And then I went into teaching, and even then it was like, I don't, there's something else, and we can get into that exploration later. But this is wonderful. Talk a little bit about that that space? Because I think when we you would never wish that upon yourself, right? I mean, you would never have gone into your senior year being like, man, I really hope that I get concussed this year. Like, I want to hoop, I want to play, man, I'm so ready for this. But then the universe was like, fuck you, Andrew, I've got different plans. And yeah, talk us a little bit about, what that was like and what you learned.
Sure. So, I think for anyone moving through a transition, there's a period of grief that's really important to acknowledge, whether it's as acute as the loss of a loved one, or like mine, I felt was acute, which was the loss of this opportunity that I had been, earnestly preparing for months. But even on smaller levels, like there's a sense of grief that I think is important to move through and acknowledge, because, grief is the longing for something that we can never have again. And that's what's happening when you're transitioning and when you're moving through, like there is a loss. So I was grieving. And at the time, let me see. I guess I was forced to develop emotional intelligence. Like, I think it's one of my strongest traits now, but at the time I didn't want it. Like, I just wanted to hoop. Like, I didn't want any of this. Like, but, when you're dealing with something so severe and so uncertain, right? Like with a concussion, you can't go to the doctor. Like, nobody can tell you how long your suffering is going to last. If you can imagine that. So like, if you think of people who are, suffering from something chronic illness, like this is the mindset that they're probably in. So you can, maybe empathize with those people. You go to the doctor when you break your arm and it's like, all right, look, sucks, man. You broke your arm. It's going to be 6 weeks. You're in a cast. Then 6 weeks you're in rehab. And then, within 3 to 4 months, you should be back to normal. And you're like, amazing. Like, I can hunker down. I'll just like eat some fucking Ben and Jerry's and be fine. But with a concussion,
people to sign my cast.
Yeah, exactly. But with a concussion, you just these doctors go and they're like, well, how do you feel? And you're like, I feel like crap. And they're like, well, I have no idea how long it's going to take you to not feel like crap. But when you stop feeling like crap, let me know. Or when you feel like it's less, let me know. And it's just like hard to deal with. So I was forced to start learning how to deal with uncertainty and to start to, associate my identity not with what I did, but with the person that I was being. So when I got out of college, I still had a lot of hope for staying connected with the game. I remember I was interning at a startup incubator in Seattle, and it was a great opportunity because I was going to get to learn about business from people who are like really in the trenches, starting their own things and making a difference. But then this opportunity came up at a sports-based, basketball-based nonprofit to coach and mentor, and I couldn't resist. Like we were doing it at a really high level. Like one of our kids just got drafted 30th in the NBA draft, and another one was the freshman of the year in the Pac-12, and it's like most of these like basketball programs that are trying to like help kids and like support them with their academics, like they actually just kind of, they suck, right? Like they're not that they suck at what they do, they're just not ballers. You know what I'm saying? Because most of the elite players are they don't want to have to deal with that if they don't have to. They just want to get flown to tournaments. And sneaker companies are happy to fly them to tournaments. Mm-hmm. But our place was like we had ballers, so we had a reputation. So I was like, this is actually a really good opportunity. And I went to coach there. And, this was my first time post-injury attempting to really be of service and connect to basketball. And what I realized is that I thought I had the emotional skills because I knew the game and could coach it at least enough for 7th graders. Like I can help them with a few things to like tangibly improve each person's game. I was confident in that. But what I started to learn was that I did not have the emotional skills and tools for daily life. I was a bleeding heart. I wouldn't want to go so far as to say I was hurting more than I was helping, but my supervisors were working overtime just to keep me in the right mental state to be of service to our kids. And I remember thinking to myself, like, first of all, this is a breakup with basketball that is like really rocky and going on for a really long time. So trying to have empathy with myself for, like, it's hard to leave something you've loved forever. But then also realizing that I actually needed systems and tools and just a whole new skill set to help myself emotionally regulate and be the type of person who can be of service, who, instead of just being in their head all the time. So that, from there, it's a longer story, which the details don't actually matter. But from there, that's how I discovered meditation. And, of all that and the wisdom around mindfulness meditation became the bedrock skill set for me, that I've since cultivated and developed over time.
Mm. One thing I'd love to celebrate you for, Andrew, and that I just noticed as you share this story, is that you've ended up in a space that you probably years ago didn't think you would end up.
Yeah, well, I created my job. Like, there was no job for what I'd ended up doing.
Right. Right. And I think the whole, it's just been your willingness to take that next step, and really be aware and look at, okay, what is the next step to take? And let me take it. Okay, I need to work on my emotions. Okay, let me take that. I need to, find a way to settle down my mind. Okay, let me take that step. Let me look in those ways. I think that's it's very easy as we go through life to fall into this kind of, we're always looking so far out into the future of where I'm trying to go. And we try and make what's in the current moment fit this long-term picture that we have. And one thing that I really admire about you and what you've been able to do and chosen to do is allowed what's happening in these moments to give you that like direct and present feedback. And then you make those adjustments in the moment, allowing the course to just kind of go where it goes, with some direction, of course. I mean, you've obviously got an idea of where you'd like it to go, but open to when the water pushes you a different way, going with that.
Thank you. So. Thank you so much. Yeah. And, where I'm going next is to experiment with, being comfortable and at home in the face of uncertainty, which is something that I admire you a lot for. So,
and also what's interesting, again, like, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
That was something I had to learn too, like 3.5 years ago when I was teaching high school basketball, and like my life, looked like it was supposed to look in my mind. I had, the role I was playing was the role I thought I was supposed to be playing, good job, good girlfriend, good, all these. And I had a moment like kind of one you had when you were in Seattle of like, okay, but I don't know who I am. And I don't really feel comfortable sitting in my own solitude. And every time I'm by myself, I just feel so anxious. And it's like, I want to figure that out. It wasn't I want to get to the bottom of what that is. And that's like the most important thing to me right now, which is kind of like for you, it's your mental stuff and getting to the bottom of that. And then meditation became the most important thing for you. And just like allowing myself to make that choice to go in search of that thing that I really am. I think that's we don't need to have the answers. Really, it's just what questions are we asking, and then are we willing to, in search of those answers?
For sure. I mean, and it can look different ways. Like, so for me, like, I was so frustrated by what I clearly saw was a limit to myself and my ability to just be in the world. So it's interesting because like I never once thought to myself, oh, I'm asking the right questions. What I thought to myself was like, wow, I'm smacking my head against the wall because I can't deal with my anxiety. And I'm looking at the people I admire around me, and they all have some sort of tools and communities, religions, system, like they all had these things that were helping them contribute to the world. And I was just like an arrogant punk who thought I could do it by myself. So I was more like, well, what's like, what are they doing? Like, why? Like,
Right.
so, yeah, just being frustrated by my inabilities is what actually led me to meditation, right? Led me to that.
Yeah, for me, it was, I think what you're saying is exactly what I said to myself was, I don't know where I'm going, but I know here isn't it.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's enough. Like I know this isn't it. Like I'm banging my head against the wall and okay, that's, time to go
Totally.
exploring.
Totally.
Um, so tell us a little bit about your exploration now,
Yeah.
and kind of another massive identity shift and kind of role change for you recently.
For sure. For sure. So, to pick up on it, we keep talking about what did I do? What did I do? Like the result of my, you know, leaving Seattle, which I did for a girl, but also because the nonprofit went under. So it was not this like, I mean, it took some courage to move back to the East Coast where I'm from and out of this comfortable environment I had built. But it wasn't like up and out of nowhere. Like there were life circumstances that were sort of, I was hoping for love. I had forged this connection because I was struggling to connect with myself. So, I was being pulled and I had a hope for a better life. And, okay, fine. So I didn't have a job at that point and I found meditation and, I got really lucky because I got it enough in my head that I wanted to work for startups, because I liked the idea. I wanted to experiment with the idea of being a CEO. And I just wanted to like see how people who were building projects from the ground up were living on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to work for CEO. I wanted to work for one that was going to mentor me professionally and personally. Like I had that criteria. So that's nice, like enough clarity. And from there, I got really lucky because I was I was like, let me see how far I can take this meditation thing. So I just started talking about what I liked and doing what I liked, even though it was new. So if there's like a lesson, like it's like honestly, it's like talk about what you like and do what you like, and then it opens the door. So I ended up becoming the first hire at a meditation startup called Journey, which brings mental well-being curriculum into work environments. And I ended up being the first salesperson there. I helped us close like half of our first of our ever million. And we ended up leading over 5,000 classes in 15 cities across the US and as well as Canada and the UK. And then I got to start teaching because I was talking about meditation so much and immersed in our curriculum. And along the way, because I was in the world of meditation, have the opportunity to sit and learn with amazing teachers. I got the opportunity to, lead workshops. So I've gotten to lead at places like Google and Spotify and Sony, a bunch of others. But, none of it would have come if I hadn't like been able to just take those first steps of talking about what I was interested in. So now, it's coming back to the basketball thing. It's like, where did that go? Like, a huge part of my emotional transformation had to do with a physical transformation. And, kind of in a similar pattern, I was doing what I knew until it was too painful.
Mm.
So I was playing basketball, I was coaching basketball, I was actually working with a college athlete, and then I pulled my groin. So, okay, I can't, why? And it sort of goes to my head, why am I still treating myself like a basketball player when I'm not a basketball player? It's like, it took me a while to actually understand that. And it's like, well, why am I treating myself like a basketball player? Because this is the only thing I know. And it's like, of course I'm going to gravitate to what's comfortable. And once I started like really healing from my injury, it opened my eyes to all these different ways that I could be using the body. Cause like, I love to use my body. And that's when I found the Ido Portal method, and dance in general, and started seeking out teachers and going and moving my body differently and training. So now when I identify as a dancer, even though I'm not like classically trained or like have no interest in making it a profession, But when people ask me what I do, I say I'm a dancer. And all of a sudden, like, people talk to me about different teachers and different techniques. And I just have, like, I date dancers sometimes. And like, I've learned so much, um, you know, about different ways of using the body. And that is sort of feels good to me, because it's like, I've been able to take my playfulness and intensity, which are things I like about myself, and transition them from basketball, which was laden with pressure and this need for paternal approval, to something that I just do for myself. Like, no one gives a fuck if I could stand on my hands. Like, I can stand on my hands, but
it's awesome.
It's awesome. But it's like, nobody gives a crap about that. And I love that because it's for me. And it's just, so yeah. So
I think that's such a, like, at any stage in life, I think, like, yeah, I do way more things for me now than I've ever done in my life, even when they were quote unquote for me, right? Like, basketball was kind of always for me, but there was always this, like you've talked about, this pressure to succeed for somebody or some outer goal that I'm trying, school. There was always this like, I'm doing this so that I can blank.
yeah.
And I think what you're saying, what I hear you saying, and what I've certainly, felt and got a lot of enjoyment out of the last couple of years, is just doing things because this is what I really like to do.
Yeah.
And what else would I be doing, and just doing it for the sake of the mastery, or for the sake of it, not for any other reason. If those things come, cool. If that, but yeah, it's just fun. Life is fun to play with.
It's a constant pushing and expanding into me allowing myself to do that.
Totally.
And even now I'm like struggling with certain things. Like, I feel like I don't deserve to have as much fun as is available to me. And, so one of the biggest things I learned, actually, I'm really curious about your thoughts on it, is like sort of like stripping away the expectations, like what we think's expected of us. So, for me early on, like, I did basketball. It was fun for me, but I also thought that it was expected of me, and, operating at a certain level of intensity and commitment I thought that was a societal expectation. So I get, maybe this is like a working theory, like our ability to, let's create this together, so my maybe like first draft, like our ability to,
I think define those expectations for ourselves.
Yes.
Is really what we're doing. And I think,
right.
It's the reason that I went into solitude, the reason why I think you started meditating, was because at the root of what we were feeling, we didn't know what our expectation was. We knew what the world's expectation was. We knew what the world's opinion was. And we were really good at, making our role fit that. And so it was our role we were designing. It was our costume. We got to dress ourselves.
Right.
But we only had the clothes that were given to us,
Yeah. We only saw the clothes that were laid in front.
Right.
There was all these clothes, actually.
Right. There's tons of clothes. It's just, we only had a certain dresser. Right.
Yeah.
And what we both have taken the time to do, I think, is just taking the time to sit with ourselves, start to look inward and figure out, and just look at other clothes, really. I mean, it's just here. Oh, look at all of these other clothes that I could be wearing. And look at these people. Like, I wear basketball sweats all the time. And wow, look at, that guy's got some nice boots on and a cool hat. No, that's interesting. I could wear that too, And I think it's just, taking that and allowing that takes time, right, to shift that narrative. Like, for me, even, I would say it's taken me probably 3 years, like, to really come into, like, it is okay for me to do life the way that I want to do life, and trust that. Like, I finally, at this point in my life, trust it. 3.5 years ago, it was like, oh, cool, I wish I could do that one day. I hope. And now I'm like, yes, I do. I trust myself to do this thing.
Yeah, it's taken me 5 years of meditation practice. and, you know, like almost daily practice, going on retreats once a year. And I can finally say that my internal environment is a loving and compassionate place to be. Like the way I talk to myself, the way I treat myself, infinitely more loving and compassionate and patient and empathetic with myself, you know, than I've ever been. But it really only came into being in the last year, and it was greatly enhanced by my opportunity to teach it. You know, they say you retain 80% of the information you can teach. I always jumped at the opportunity to teach because I thought it was a great privilege, not only to serve, but selfishly, you know, it's like, I'm going to retain a shitload of this information. So I'm really like, it's like, thank you, you know, for letting me present it.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah. And I think one thing is, it's interesting that you bring that up about the teacher being the teacher. Because I always really liked teaching too. And I always have, I still teach with Play Explore Love and with PGC. But it was when I really started becoming the pupil that the teaching actually started to change. Like,
yeah.
And give an example of that. So like when I first started directing with PGC, it was very at the beginning of this journey back in 2016. And I taught what I thought I was supposed to teach. And it was still these ideas that I held in my head that I was like, I have the ideas and I'm going to give you the ideas, you know, and it's still kind of this, you know, I'm teaching the concept, but I'm not living or teaching the essence of it. And it was when I started to look at myself and started to, as the Sufi teacher Hazrat Inayat Khan talks about, just becoming a pupil, becoming receptive to the light of God, which is the light within, which we access through meditation, mantra practice, whatever it may be, however we find that, going in nature, watching the sunset, you know, but kind of getting to that stillness and finding that essence within ourselves, that space, and then teaching from there. Oh my goodness, how much that teaching helps me reflect and reminds me of myself, you know?
Yeah. Like you took yourself out of it.
Right. Because I'm just reflecting what's in here, out here, and I'm not thinking about it so much. And so like this summer, I'm teaching athletes all summer. I'm telling them, hey, this week, you know, cowabunga, like just go all in. Like, just, you know, what are you waiting for? What are you afraid of? Just jump in. Like I teach it on the first day. And then I'm sitting there at the end of one of those lessons, and I'm like, you fucking hypocrite.
Yeah. See, I'm jealous of that because you get that moment.
Yeah. And I'm like, you fucking hypocrite, Rob. You told athletes all summer, cowabunga, jump in. What are you waiting for? And you haven't jumped in on Play Explore Love. You fucking hypocrite, you know? Yeah. And then I'm like, okay. I can't stand up here and teach this if I'm not going to live it. Cool. I guess I got to go cowabunga too. And, yeah, so I think that's like, it's not that we lose expectation when we start going inward. It's just that the expectation we set becomes our own, and we kind of become we become the Dharma, you know, we become the teaching, we become our life just becomes this expression, and then we learn from it, and we get a little bit closer to the ideal every day.
Yeah. And, you know, also, it's nice to notice that like your teachers don't have their shit figured out just because they're teaching it.
Totally. We're all we're all at different levels trying to figure out, you know, we're all scientists just shared field notes is the way I like to think about it. Awesome. You know, take my field notes or don't. Do these help you on your study or not? You know, whatever, man.
Yeah. Right. The terrain is infinite. So it's like, what the fuck? Like, do I need this? Whatever.
Right. You know?
Yeah.
And I think there are some that are consistent though, right? I think like love, compassion, understand. Like there are some that like I think you and I have both found. It's like, okay, these are good ones to go after.
Yeah.
Or not even good ones, just like the natural ones that just kind of come out in all of us.
I remember my first, you know, might have been Dabo Sweeney who was talking about this, the head coach of Clemson Tigers football team. Or it was someone else. It was a football coach. And he was talking about how confidence comes from demonstrated results. And I really love that because, you know, our teacher, Dina Evans, talked about confidence coming from two things, right? It's like what you're good at, what you've practiced, and then what you think about all day. And it's like, it's interesting. I like the I like this like idea that confidence comes from demonstrated results, because I think that to actually act on some of these internal inclinations that we have to question a societal expectation, or to move on from basketball like it was for me. It took actually taking those first steps and seeing some results like in the field. And I remember my first time questioning society. So I am by no means like a counterculturalist. Like, I grew up in Long Island. I got good grades. I went to a good school. I'm like a nice Jewish boy who like has a good relationship with their parents. Like, but I do remember the first time when I graduated from college, I did not have a job, but I was offered a place to live in Seattle, Washington, with good friends. It was an excellent place. It wasn't just a place to live. It was an excellent place to live. So to put it in context, I was going to be paying $500 a month, and I was going to be living down the street from Howard Schultz, who was the former or current CEO of Starbucks. So it was a nice neighborhood, and it was with my best friend from college, two of my best friends from college. And I remember just being like, I'm moving to Seattle. And at the time, I told people about that, and everyone's first question was, well, what are you going to do for work? What are you going to do for work? What are you going to do for work? And that's the first time I started to notice that, oh, the societal expectation is that you prioritize your job. However, I'm prioritizing my living situation. And to me, it was like, I wasn't being like, fuck you, society. I was just like, wait, like wherever I work, I'm going to need to live. Like, this is a choice I'm making either way. Why is it so countercultural to prioritize this over this? Like, I have the financial means to get there and then figure it out. And people were like, oh, that's so radical. Like, what are you doing? And it was my first, like, demonstrated results where I started to understand that, like, it's like, what? Like, the logic does not always check out because it's popular.
And you're the only one who has to live with the logic if you use it, right? I think that's the, like, yeah. Doesn't mean the logic's inherently wrong. Like, for me, marriage was one that, like, for a long time, I was just like, nope. Well, I was kind of like, I want this definitely. But then it was like, well, society, like, this is just such a societal thing. And why get married? And so many people get divorced anyway. And like, throw it out, just completely throw the whole societal thing out. And then I started thinking about it, and I was like, but is the whole societal thing wrong? Or do I just need to do I just need to define for myself what is important to me with it? What about it is mine, right? Because how can a whole, like, I think we allow we just like make these assumptions that like there's this societal belief that is like all encompassing that we then either accept or reject, right? Yeah. And like, that totally devalues our role as creator, both of history and of this present moment, right? And like, those societal values, maybe they're real, maybe they're, make believe, whatever, but they were created by somebody else. At some point, they were created, and new ones can be created too. And we can draw from those things. Like, there are pieces of it that are beautiful in marriage and the idea of marriage. There are parts of it I disagree with. And so Juliana and I had that conversation around, like, what do we want marriage to be? What do we believe that to be? What are our expectations in our partnership? And then fuck everybody else, Are we doing it in love? Are we doing, are we not doing any harm? Like,
yeah.
And then let's just be happy and be our, let's be the truest expression of ourselves, because nobody else can tell us what that looks like. That's the whole crux of the issue, right? Is everybody's trying to tell everybody else how they're supposed to live, but nobody could tell anybody else how they're supposed to live, because all they can do is
I want to challenge you on that, because I actually don't think it's everyone else telling everyone else how they're supposed to live. I think we internalize it all subconsciously before anyone can say anything. And then we're just navigating our own abilities to counteract what we think is safe.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. Then,
Like
so
obviously you get this stupid chatter of like, oh, you're doing it like that, and then you have to calm them down.
right. No, I think. Well, no, I mean, what you're getting at, I think, is like, I mean, it's the whole concept behind the Enneagram, right? That we were
Yeah.
talking about earlier. Is that basically like we come into the world as children, our parents or our teachers or whatever this like overarching society is teaches us how to live, maybe in like consciously saying, hey, you need to do this, sometimes unconsciously, and we're just picking that stuff up before we even know it.
Yeah.
And then we develop a certain pattern of personality with which we see the world and a framework with which we operate in, and then we just continue to operate within that framework unless we become conscious of it and then realize, whoa, we actually have a lot of choices outside of that framework that we've been either consciously or a lot of times unconsciously kind of just
Yeah.
working within.
So for me, I want to trace my relationship with fear, because you asked like talking about my journey, and I said, well, we can tell that story from a zillion different angles. I started with basketball. I could have easily told it through the lens of fear.
Mm.
So brief version, but for people who are out there maybe like suffering with fear and anxiety and like, or whatever, making a choice, basketball for me was a lot based in fear. So I was great playing in practice and in open gyms and stuff like that, but I would always have a lot of performance anxiety and suffer
Me too.
during games. Why? So it's like I had a lot of fear because of disapproval from my dad. If I didn't play well, it didn't just mean disappointing my teammates. Like it meant disappointing my father. It meant disappointing my coach, who was this sort of like surrogate figure for my father. Like I still have some fear around older male authority figures that I'm just probably going to have for the rest of my life, but I'm learning to be with it in a more skillful way. But anyway, fear was this huge part of like trying to play basketball well. And then my relationship to fear totally changed, because it became like, I'm afraid for my life when I had a concussion. So I started to make some emotional choices to sort of try and preserve myself. And these days, my fear comes up, and because I've been meditating for years and I've seen a therapist and have some more like confidence through that demonstrated experience, right? Like I've made some choices and done some things in the world. I have a little bit more ability to push back on that fear. And like, like Byron Katie with the work, like gently question, is this true? How do I know it's true? And work with it in a way so it doesn't paralyze me in the same way. Now, that's not to say that I don't hit the boundary. Like I'm constantly hitting the boundary of where I'm like, fuck, like this is too hot. I'm too afraid. I cannot, like right now, I'm in between jobs, and I don't have to get into the whole story, but I'm choosing where my next travel is going to be, and it's paralyzing me in fear. But that's okay, because I hope that people out there listening can start to understand, like, I'm less afraid of what people are going to think and say about me and disappointing people. And I'm more in touch with my own fundamental worthiness and belovedness that is not based on the results I produce, just because who I am. Like, it's my birthright to deserve love and affection and safety. I don't have to earn it anymore. I understand that the fear now is me just sort of like battling with the ghosts and old ideas inside of myself. It's no less of a battle, but it's a nice reframe. Yeah,
Totally. And it's that, I mean, there's no way to do this work without crossing the bridge of fear at some point,
yeah,
and sitting in that, right? Because the ultimate thing, and the ultimate one is death, right? The one we can never run from. The ultimate fear is that this body, this mind that we exist in, is going to pass, right? I mean, it's going to die. And that then trickles down into all of the other little fears, right? And I was watching something on Instagram the other day that was saying, I think it was Murti, Mutri, thank you,
yeah,
Krishna Mutri, and he was saying, like, as long as there's you and there's something to be afraid of, then the fear is always going to have this dominance. But once you start to realize that the fear actually is you, that the thing that is feeling afraid actually is you, then it's not so much, oh, I'm trying to not be afraid. It's just, oh, there's fear here. Okay. What's it afraid of? It is that, like going into what you were talking about, is that fear valid? What's it coming from? Maybe it is too hot right now. Like, oh, nope, I got to step away. And that's okay. But come back tomorrow. A little cooler now, the water's a little less. Okay, cool. I can maybe dip my fingers in it now. But yeah, I mean, starting Play, Explore, Love. It's so funny even now, like going back and thinking about the first podcast I did and now episode 21. And like, I was so nervous and afraid when I had this idea. It was like, oh, I'm going to have a podcast for just like open conversations about things. And like, what? No way. This little person who's always like looked to others for validation and like thought about what other people are going to say and what people are going to think, and like kind of has curated things for people that I've like known and talked to. I'm just going to put shit out on the internet. Fuck you. Like, no way. And then it's like, okay, but calm down for a second. Look, what are you really afraid of? And is that fear still valid? And what I found was like, yeah, the fear's real. It's not that valid. People are going to think what they're going to think. I'm doing it. Like, all I can control is how I do it, how I show up with it. And, let's go for it. So.
Yeah, let's talk about the play in Play, Explore, Love, because as I'm listening to you, I'm like trying to circle this back around to like life is like a game of dress up, and I'm so like, so when you said, oh, releasing my own podcast, I think of myself of like taking on my first coaching clients, and I remember sitting in front of people, and like it was this evolution where now I have no problem sitting in front of someone. I've coached people who are older than me. I've coached people who are not the same skin color as me, not the same gender as me, not the same sexual orientation as me. Like, I'm no longer inhibited. And coaching has basically like a lot of it is teaching people meditation. So I'm not, anyway, people might ask, how are you qualified to be a coach? But it's another conversation. Anyway, I remember first the idea, I was like playing with it. It wasn't like idea. Then I stood up and like challenged society, gave everyone the finger and then started. And it was this like course. It was more like, let me put on the coach hat. Let me put on the coach costume. Let me try this out for like 15 minutes. Like, I'll be in a conversation with someone. I'm like, hey, can I just play with you for a second? I want to put my, like, literally, this is what I would say. Hey, can I play with you? Can I play with you for a second? I'm going to put my coach hat on. Literally, this is what I'm saying. I think the language is important. And if I was wearing my coach hat, this is what I would say. And then I would just ask people guiding questions or offer a suggestion. And then I'd take my coach hat off, literally like, okay, I'm going to take my coach hat off now. We're friends again. Do you want to grab a beer or like whatever? And I'd be like, hey, how was that for you? So playing little bit. And then it's like, oh, like I feel safe enough that I can show this to the world.
Well, you've gotten what did you say, double that confidence?
The demonstrated experience.
The demonstrated experience, right? And I think when we look at, I love that you highlighted that, because that really is when I went out to California and I quit my job, when I first got out there, this woman asked me, what do you do? And the most instinctual answer I could think of, because I was single, unemployed, sleeping on my brother's floor, like, what the hell do I do? Was I play with life.
Yeah, I'm playing.
I'm just playing with this thing.
Yeah.
Because when we're kids, that's all we know how to do. We come out of the womb and we are playing and we are curious and we are looking around the corner at this and that. And I picked this, you reach to the stove because it's, oh man, I want to touch that. How interesting. You touch it, it burns the shit out of you. And you're like, oh, nope, don't want to touch that, But that doesn't mean we stop touching everything. We just, check if the stove's hot first before we touch it. And it becomes this just, you just play with it. And I used to put so much pressure on myself, and I imagine you probably did too, because it's like, I need to do this thing to get somewhere. And I'm trying, and like, this moment is so important because if I fail right now, I'll never get there.
Well, yeah, that sounds like a lot of what I'm dealing with right now in terms of.
But the beautiful thing is that when we look back at our life, and when you look back at your life, and what's now fun for all of the listeners is they get to kind of look back at your life too. You can and I would challenge anybody who's listening to look back at, like, throw the thread backwards, I like to call it.
Nice.
And look at the big moments in your life that like really shifted things, that really, set the direction. And I would guess that at least one of them wasn't planned. At
Right.
least one of them was wildly negative, or quote unquote negative, like life jarring, shitty. You wouldn't wish it on your worst enemy. And yet here we still are, here we still are. And how beautiful, and how much more enjoyable all of that might have been if we had just had a playfulness with it the whole time.
Even for people who are more anxiety based, like I am, and want to throw the thread forward and say, okay, well, what is this going to look like? I think the role of play is so indispensable because, what are the two main things we're talking about? The main thing we're talking about in this conversation is expectations. And play is this space where you get to experiment without any expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first started my movement practice. Okay, so not playing basketball anymore. And people would say, oh, because they only knew me from basketball. So they would say, oh, are you still playing? And I'd be like, yes. but in a different way. You know what I'm saying? It's like, right. Yes, but I use my energy in this way now. I'm learning basic gymnastics or whatever, or something like that. And it's like, I never wanted to be this type of person who said I stopped playing. Even if my knees go out and I can't play basketball, I'm going to be doing something, juggling or something. And it's like when I play, it's not always, I don't know, it's not always official. It's like, how do I describe this? Like I try on an identity. So to keep my story going, when I got to Samar, because I left my job at Journey Meditation after 4 years, we had raised a round of funding. We had brought meditation to a lot of different people. It wasn't the place for me anymore. And I said, I'm burnt out. I'm going to quit my job. And I didn't just say I'm going to quit my job. I saved up for 8 months. I planned meticulously to support myself financially and logistically in the process. And I maintained my professional integrity and did not burn any bridges. I had threw a goodbye party for myself, like not just saying go quit your job, but I set it up. So when I finally left, I ended up, I chose a place to live in Israel that was basically a work exchange. So it was financially sustainable and it had a lot of the things that would make me happy. When I finally got there, they asked me what I did. And I was like, here's my opportunity to play. And I told everyone I was a dancer. Like, I just told them that. And, it was amazing, shocking to me that even though I felt like a basketball player a little bit, I felt like a meditation person inside. Because I was playing with this new identity, they just started to relate to me as a dancer. So it gave me so much more freedom to be and experiment that now, like that part of myself is solidified in a way. I don't have to try as hard to cultivate it. I don't feel like I'm going against expectations inside of myself or against society because I've taken something out of the realm of play and more into the realm of something that's, I don't know, demonstrated, right? Something that's, yeah.
Yeah.
Solid.
Yeah. It's just keeping that childlikeness as you get older, and Jesus says in the Bible, unless you become like little children, you'll never inherit the kingdom of heaven.
That's awesome.
And it's like, because what did children do? I mean, honestly, that was like the original working tagline, right? The original working tagline for Play, Explore, Love was reconnect with your inner child.
Nice.
I've shifted it to uncover your truest self, just because I think that's more, direct and clear. But it really is this, and in psychology, there's all this stuff about inner child work, but it really, I think yeah, the crux of life. I mean, really, what I've experienced has been my adult life has gotten better and more enjoyable and more authentic when
Yeah.
I've allowed myself to act like a child. Not
Yeah.
that means shirking responsibility, or like you were saying, like you made your plans, you did it consciously, you did it with an awareness, right? I think that's where children, that's the negative of children, right? There's not always an awareness. They break, they break things because they're unaware. And
Yeah.
I think in adulthood, we have the ability to live with more awareness. Uh, but that consciousness and that awareness sometimes makes us lose that childlikeness and that playfulness. And it's, oh, I'm in this job, I'm in this role. Well, I've got to be in this role for the next 40 years. Well, like I heard Ram Dass talking one time. He was doing a thing, and he was like, and I was talking to a woman, and she just said, I'm sad. And I can't be anything else. I'm just sad. And he said, okay, I understand. I hear that you're sad. But could you be sad for like 10 minutes? And then maybe the other 50 minutes, put on whatever you want. Maybe it's still sadness, but just, you don't have to be that all the time, right? Even when you are a basketball player, or you are in something that's taking up a lot of your identity, cool, be a basketball player for 4 hours a day when you're in practice and you're on the court and you're in the weight room. But, maybe you could try something else on for a little bit in the other time in the other 20 hours of the day that you have, or however much there is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't have to be grand to actually like.
No. Well, no, one thing I do, one practice that I have done, that I do pretty much every day, is 5 minutes of play. Just 5 minutes of childlike play. Sometimes I'll just put on a record or put on a song and dance for 5 minutes. Sometimes I'll go to the gym and I'll just shoot hoops. Sometimes I'll do yoga, but it's some kind of like intentional, just no expectation, no judgment play. Sometimes it could be like what you were talking about with other people. Hey, let me put this role hat on, or let me,
or it could be like just pretending you're someone you're not.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, what would, let me just play this out. Let me act as this person for the next 5 minutes and
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I've done this whole podcast pretending that I meditate. Like I actually, my entire It's not true. It's not true. It's a huge part of my life. But it's like, look, the identities aren't, it's not that serious. Like, look, it's like, for me, basketball was the easiest and most accessible thing. And I realized actually for my parents, it was also the easiest and most accessible way to like show their love for me, because it's something I had demonstrated interest in. But it's like, now that it's like, now that those bonds aren't the same, no one has to relate to me that way anymore. I can just, I can teach them. I get the opportunity to teach people how to love me now.
Right. Well, and when we stop being so caught up in the costume that we're wearing, then we relate to the person, behind the costume, right? We relate to, oh, okay, hey, Andrew, you're wearing a purple shirt today. Well, oh, tomorrow you're wearing a red shirt. Well, I still love you, Andrew. It doesn't,
Well, so this is an interesting thing, because I think that one of the things that inhibits play is fear. And one of the things that one of the big fears, in the early stages of anyone's journey, I think, is external societal expectation, right? So it's like, there are these moments where, like, it's important to go and play, because it's these small moments that nobody can tell you about. You have to feel it in your own experience, where you realize that it's okay not to be who you always said you were. It's like, it's interesting to hear it. But like, for example, like very small example, when I was living in Seattle, I joined a soccer league. Okay. It's so basic. I just went from saying, instead of joining a basketball league with my college buddies, I went and joined a soccer league with my roommates. And I just remember all these little tiny moments where I sucked at soccer and it was fine. For me, it had never been okay to suck at a sport before. So, all these little things added up to me realizing that there is, like, I will be loved and cared for in the world. even if I don't check all these boxes, which lowers my anxiety. If that makes sense. So for people who are new to meditation, like you've probably talked about this in another podcast because of who you are and who you talk to, but just so it's in this segment, like it's a practice of cultivation. The mind wanders and we choose to bring it back to the breath. And that over and over and over again, it's like thousands of reps. You start to get familiar with the mind, and the heart cannot help but crack open with a sense of compassion and patience and empathy. Like it's like a byproduct of it. You don't have to worry about it. It's already happening. And it's the same way, I think, with play. Little tiny moments where we realize that it's safe to be a little bit different than we've always said we were going to be. It's safe to be a little bit different than who others expect us to be all the time. And you sort of just learn it and learn it and learn it before you actually just start to walk around with like, okay, I got that. It's fine. I can be who I can dress up, right? Life's a game of dress up. I can do it. I can be whoever I say I want to be. Something like that.
Something like that. That's a perfect place to end. Okay. And I've actually got to jump on another call, but that was so wonderful.
I love you, man. Thank you so much for having me on this.
I love you too, brother. That was wonderful. Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you on again. And that was great. I'll see you soon.
Episode 2. The repeat. All right.
Love you, brother.
Love you too.
See you, man.